Hey guys, and welcome to today's Vlogmas episode. So today is a very much requested one because I get questions about veterinary on the daily. So I thought I would do one big video answering all your commonly asked questions all about veterinary. I'm going to cover how I got into veterinary, kind of questions about working as a vet, internships, equine, Australia versus Ireland, how I find it, how I found vet school, any tips for vet school, tips for studying. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, then be sure to keep watching. So I study veterinary in Ireland, so it will vary a little bit depending on what country you're in. A lot of the questions were, what A-levels did you do? What GCSEs did you do? But that is the English system and we do not do that in Ireland. But we do something a little bit similar. So in Ireland you do your junior cert, which is kind of like your GCSEs, and then you have 2 more years where you study for your leaving cert, which is like your A-levels. And then depending on the results of those exams, you then can get a place in vet school. So the big difference I think between A-levels and the leaving cert is that for the leaving cert you generally do 7 subjects and your 6 best grades are counted. Your grades are transferred into points depending on what grade you get. It's a certain amount of points, and then all those points are added up, and that is the amount of points that you got in your leaving cert. So before you sit your final exams, you put in your CAO application form. You basically just rank what courses you want to do in order of preference, and then they fill the spots in each course based on the people with the most amount of points get in first, and then it goes down the way from there. So the points required to get into a course in Ireland is actually totally dependent on the popularity of the course and not anything to do with how difficult the course is. I feel like that is a common misconception. Veterinary is very, very high points. It's over 600, but only because there is only one vet college in Ireland. So there's only like 80 places. That's why the points are so high. It's not that veterinary is harder than any other degree. It's just based on the popularity of the course and how many places there are. The subjects I did for the leaving cert was I did English, Irish, maths. They're your 3 core subjects you have to do. Irish, I did lower level Irish because I'm terrible at Irish. Also, just a note that these are the rules for getting into veterinary 7 or 8 years ago when I applied. So it's going to be slightly different now. At the time you had to have a foreign language to get into UCD. I don't know if that's changed, it might not have. So I did French, and then to do veterinary you had to do chemistry. So I did chemistry. It was highly recommended to do biology. It wasn't mandatory then, and I don't know if that's changed, but I would recommend doing biology. I also did biology. I also did ag science, agricultural science. Would recommend, guys. That was the easiest grade I've ever gotten. You have to do a project for it where you have to pick a farming system. So you have to do 1 livestock system and 2, what is it called? Plants? I don't know, like grain, grass, that kind of thing. For my livestock, I did horses. So I just talked about our horses. I wasn't even breeding horses at the time, so it was a pure joke, but it was very fun and easy, and good way to get a good grade. So that's 7, and then I did an extra subject. I did applied maths. So those were the subjects I did to get in. The year I did it, I think the points required to get in ended up being 585, 590 or something like that. I got an A1 in everything except biology, I think. I got an A2. So I think that was with the grades. That was a while ago now. I think that's what I got. So I got a lot of questions about, any tips for the interview? We didn't have to do an interview to get into vet school at that time. I know now there is. So now to get into vet school, I believe you have to do an interview, and there's a mandatory amount of hours placement, like EMS seeing placement at a vet clinic that you have to do, and I am all for this. That is a great decision. We did not have to do that. Yeah, we didn't even have to show that we had any interest at all in being a vet to get in. It was just based on your grades, which is quite funny when you think, but yeah, so at the time, so I didn't do an interview, so I have no advice, unfortunately. The only thing I suppose, looking back, if like with the knowledge I have now, if you were to do an interview, I think it's quite similar to, say, interviewing for a job, especially a job as an intern. They don't care if you are the smartest person that walks the earth. It's all about your mentality and your attitude towards it. Like, if you show that you genuinely care about veterinary, you genuinely want to be a vet, and you're very enthusiastic about the course, that's going to pay dividends. That is so much better than having top marks in every single subject ever. So then we move on to vet school. So I started vet school when I had, I think, just turned 19. I didn't do TY and I didn't take a gap year, so I was fairly nifty through the system and straight into uni. So it's a 5-year course. It gets a little bit more practical the more you go along. The first year or two is very much learning like anatomy, a lot of biology and stuff, and then it gets a lot more practical the further you go along, which all accumulates into final year, where you do rotations in the veterinary teaching hospital, which is basically a large and small animal hospital it's at the uni, but it's a working like veterinary clinic. So you do your rotations through there, and you also do some external placement as well, wherever you would like to do some. There's like mandatory weeks you have to do in each different type of veterinary, and then you have a few weeks extra that you can just do with whatever interests you the most. So when you finish vet school, everyone asks me this. This must be a really common misconception, but people are constantly asking, how did you specialize in equine? Was it a separate route for equine? How do you become just a general vet? So when you graduate vet school after your 5 years, you're qualified to do any species. I am an equine vet because I graduated and then said, I only want to do equine, and that's what made me an equine vet. You know, there's no like specialization, there's no like streaming in UCD in Dublin. I know in other unis I think there are slight streams in final year, but in Dublin it is just, you just do everything. I could have gone and done small animal, I could have done large animal, I could have done exotics, I could have worked for the Department of Agriculture in a cushy office job, which I probably should have done. But anyway, I did not. I just decided I wanted to do equine, so that's what I did. And I could now still go back and do small animal, even though I think I've forgotten absolutely everything I know about small animal veterinary, so possibly not. So all through veterinary I said I wasn't going to do an internship. I said that's not for me because I don't want to be a surgeon. In my head I thought you do an internship to do a residency to become a board certified surgeon. It's just not the case, is it? So I was nearing graduation and I realized, what am I going to do? Don't really want to work at home in Ireland, really close to where I live, making all the mistakes that, you know, new vets do and giving myself a bad name where I live. So I said, geez, I better go overseas. Said, should I go to England? England's kind of annoying because it's just far enough that I can't ride the horses, but it's not so far that it's, you know, a different way of living and stuff like that. So I said, oh, I do have an Australian passport, I should just go to Australia. So I said, right, I'll go to Australia. I decided to look for some jobs and I realised, oh, I've left this way too late and now there's like no jobs advertised anymore. They've all been filled. So I had a bit of panic. Did find one job. It was a 6-month internship, which is exactly what I wanted because I just wanted to work during the miserable Irish winter. I will say, I'm now in the miserable Australian summer because it's like windy and cloudy. But anyway, that's just because I live in Victoria and Bendigo. That was a mistake, guys. Go north. North is hotter, not south, north. Anyway, so I found this job, 6 months, perfect. Still accepting applications. brilliant. I read the name, I was like, I know that name. I had actually bumped into a vet earlier that year who had worked at the practice and she loved it. So I said, amazing, I will apply for this job. I did an online interview. I never met any of these people in person. I never did any placement here because obviously it was in Australia, and I don't know about you guys, but paying flights to go and just see placement in Australia is just, that would be a lot. But anyway, I applied, did the interview, waited ages. They did not get back to me for a long time, and because of the time zones, every morning I would wake up and check my emails going, oh, maybe this morning's the morning that, you know, they'll email. No. I graduated, still had no reply. I was like, you know, got my results, did my graduation ceremony, all that, still no response. And then finally they got back to me and said, we would like you to come over and work for us. So thank goodness they did. So that place was the Bendigo Equine Hospital in Bendigo in Victoria in Australia, and I'm still there. So I'm very glad they did ask me to work for them because I love my job here. So I did that 6-month internship. It was hard work, but I had a great time. I do feel like you always look back and only remember the good times. Like there was probably quite a few nights where I, you know, only had about 4 hours of interrupted sleep. But it was great. I get on really well with all the vets here. It's just, yeah, the weather is good. The work-life balance in Australia is excellent. I will talk about that later. Yeah, really enjoyed it. So I did my 6-month internship. I cried when I had to leave because I was so sad about leaving. But luckily they wanted me back and I agreed to come back the following season. So I started my internship, say August, finished in February, and then when I was leaving they said, do you want to come back? I said absolutely, and they said great, come back next August and do another 6-month season, because I always kind of said I wanted to be a repro vet, just mostly do stud work and reproduction, and the busy season for stud work is between, well, September to January in Australia. So I went back to Ireland in February and I got a job working with a vet near me. He was about 40 minutes from my house, and I was working part-time, so it kind of varied. It was about 3 or 4 days a week, and it was a lot of scanning, which was good, and then a lot of other bits and bobs too. It was only one other vet, so it was very different to my job in Australia where we have 7, 8 vets, 9, and quite a lot of vets. So it's quite different, just going from like a hospital to an ambulatory practice with one other vet. But I learned a lot and it was good. And it was good to be able to keep riding the horses, and the part-time made it a little bit easier for that. So it was very good. And then I went back to Australia in August and worked the season. Started crying again when I had to leave again. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm actually not kidding. I do cry every time I have to leave. I'm always very upset. But I then said, look guys, I really love this job. I really love the studs. I love the clients. I love the other vets I work with. I love my bosses. Yeah, I like Bendigo. I like living here. I know the place now, you know, like coming back to here, it's so easy. Like I arrive back and I know where everything is. It's easy to find somewhere to live. It's just really nice. So I said, look, I really like it here. And they said, great, do you want to sign a 3-year contract? And I said, yeah, would love to do that. So this is the first of my 3 seasons that I've agreed to do. So I feel like I'm nearing the end of this, even though, okay, I have 2 months left here, and then I'm gonna come back the next 2 seasons. And when I go back to Ireland in 2 months' time, I'm actually have a job in France. So I feel like that is the sum total of my veterinary career so far. I'm also starting a certificate in equine stud medicine. So that's the kind of way you can specialize in equine or stud medicine. You know, you can do just extra courses or like postgraduate courses. So that's what I'm going to do there, just to get a little bit more learning. But yeah, that is the kind of sum total of my veterinary career. I think it does kind of highlight the many paths you can go down and the many avenues it opens, the amount of countries you can go to. You'll always find work. It's great. It's a great community. So now I might answer an actual few specific questions, if that's okay. Okay, so I have a few questions written down because I'm filming on my phone. The Q&A is on my phone. A bit confusing. So I'm going to answer these questions and I'll look and see if there's any more. So the first question is, what are the hours like? Which I would say really varies, and it also ties into another question, which is, how does veterinary compare in Australia versus Ireland? So I can only speak for equine veterinary, and then I'll mention other types of veterinary that I just know from my friends working there. But in Australia, in my job currently, I work in a hospital. We do ambulatory and in-clinic consults. We do referral cases and also first opinion. So it's really a bit of everything, which is what I really love about it. So we generally do morning rounds at 8:30. So the associate vets can get in there just before then, and we meet up for rounds and we talk about all the cases. We go around the hospital, talk about all the cases, make all the jobs for the day, look at the calendar to see what consults we have booked in, and then everything kicks off. The interns do start earlier than that because they have to have checks and treatments done before rounds, 4 rounds, so they start a bit earlier. Then the finish time is the golden question because it is very variable. We do afternoon checks are at 4, but rounds can really vary. It depends on how busy we are. Because I just work this season, it is usually very busy when I'm working here. So it can really vary from, we could get home at 4:30, you know, they could do their checks at 4 and do rounds at 4:30 and then be done and go home. Or, you know, if there's a million things coming in, emergencies, you know, colic surgeries, everything, then, you know, sometimes you don't get home until 8. It just totally varies. But I feel like maybe in some places, if you're not on call, you would just leave, but we're a bit of like a team atmosphere, so you kind of don't leave. There's a million jobs to be done. You just wouldn't leave everyone else to do them, so we all just kind of chip in and help and get things done. So that's why it's very variable. When I was in Ireland seeing practice, I feel like the hours are a lot longer in Ireland. Many times I would say when I was a student, I would go around with one of the vets, and even I know the vets now, they would start at 6 and not get home until 9 o'clock at night. So that's kind of the vibe I get from equine veterinary in Ireland, having only worked there as a part-time, so hard to know. But if you want a super good work-life balance, you need to work in small animal. You need to work in small animal in a city where they don't do out of hours because they refer it all to a specific clinic that will do the out of hours for them. So I have a friend and she is genius because she works part-time, gets paid more than anyone else, and does no out of hours. So I think it very much varies, and you can tailor what jobs you apply to for if it suits your work-life balance that you have in mind. And with regards to being on call, at my work we have a 1 in 6 rota, so I'm on call 1 in 6 weekends, and then I'm on call 1 weeknight a week, but I'm not on call a weeknight the week before or after I'm on the weekend. I know that's complicated, but basically a 1 in 6 rota, which is excellent. In Ireland you'd be doing well to be in a 1 in 3 in equine, just as a reference. So another question was asking me, what is the toughest year of veterinary? In Dublin, everyone says third year is the hardest, and it probably is a bit the hardest because it has a lot of very bulky modules, is that what they're called? So that probably is the hardest. Full disclosure, I actually failed a module in third year, so I feel like veterinary is one of those ones where everyone that's in veterinary, when they were in secondary school, they were top of their class because you have to get very good grades to get into veterinary. And then all of us are grouped in together and you can't all be top of the class. So it's a bit of a wake-up call. That kind of leads on nicely to another question, which was any tips for studying veterinary or just studying in general and note-taking, etc. So I would say that I was so inconsistent in my study technique through uni. I feel like every year I had a new idea, a new way of taking notes. This was going to be the way, this was going to work the best, and I don't know if any of them were actually any good. So what I would recommend looking back is one, taking notes on a computer and putting it on a Google Doc, hard drive, something, so that when you're graduated you can just go onto your computer and you can just type a little keyword and all your notes about that will come up. Very handy. The second thing is that I would relate everything to real life cases, like everything from anatomy. Like, I feel like when you're learning anatomy and there's 1 million muscles and tendons and ligaments and bones and joints, and it gets like, why do I need to know all this? Well, you do need to know it, and it's actually really, really, really helpful to know your anatomy really well. So what I would do in hindsight is I would say you're doing the tendons in the horse's leg and you go, you know, deep digital flexor tendon and suspensories and all of them, and then you can like apply it to what kind of horses injure their suspensories. Dressage horses, hind suspensories, that's like a thing. You know, thoroughbreds, it's going to be their front limbs, you're going to have more soft tissue injuries and things like that. Like, I remember learning about collateral ligaments and I didn't even understand what they were, and now I feel like every second day we're scanning a collateral ligament tear or strain. So yes, I feel like at the time it feels very overwhelming, but you just need to apply it to actual clinical cases and it'll just make so much more sense and it'll be so much easier to learn, and it'll just be easier because you'll know why you're learning this. So that would be my tip. So the next question is, are there any extra exams you need to take to work in Australia? So I did not need to take any extra exams to work in Australia. I graduated in Ireland, Dublin, and we're accredited in Australia, so I didn't have to take any other exams. It was super easy, there was no problems at all. Dublin is accredited in America, but you still have to take the NAVLE, which is another exam, which a lot of people do in final year. When you're in final year, it'll become a whole thing. I remember, oh my god, I feel like 80% of my class took the NAVLE, and it was this big stress, and they were all studying it and I wasn't taking it. I was like, oh, I feel great, I don't have to study for all this extra exam. You only have to take it if you want to work in America, Canada, I'm not sure where else, apologies. But every country, if you just Google veterinary requirements, they'll often have a list and then of each country, and you just look up where you graduated and then it'll tell you what you need to do to work in the country. Okay, the next question is, should you do an internship if you wanted to be an equine vet? And this person said they've heard horror stories, which, that's fair. There are a lot of horror stories about internships, about quote unquote slave labour and working crazy hours and no pay, etc. So I am so glad I did my internship. I loved my internship, as I said, and I feel like it was very nice because this kind of ties into another question which asked, did you feel prepared to be a vet when you graduated? Because I absolutely did not feel prepared to be a vet when I graduated, and there is a saying that you learn more in your first year out of in practice than the whole 5 years of veterinary school combined, and I feel like that is very true. It's a huge learning curve. You learn so much once you graduate and you're actually in practice and seeing things and seeing real life cases, and this is what actually happens in real life. So I was very happy I did it. I felt I got a huge amount of confidence out of it. The pay for an internship is much better in Australia than Ireland, which will surprise some Australian vets, because I feel like when I talk to vets here, they're like, oh, internships was paid so badly. But as a comparison, this is very ballpark figures, but I saw an internship advertised at €20,000 a year in Ireland, and in Australia they're about 50 something thousand euros a year. That's like converted. So it's about twice the salary in Australia than Ireland, which I don't know if that tells you how good Australia is or how terrible Ireland was. That was 3 years ago that salary was there, so maybe things are changed, but that's the kind of, it's a notoriously poor salary, long hours. So it's just up to you if you're happy to work through that for the benefit of all the knowledge you gain, or if you would like to go straight into a practice. So totally up to you. I do feel like whether you end up doing an internship or go straight into practice, it's so important to have a good support system there, because that's the good thing about an internship. You do have lots and lots of support. You don't have a huge amount of responsibility. You don't generally have your own cases, but you're helping the other vets with their cases and therefore learning. And yeah, you kind of go through your internship, you look at the case, you just need to think, what would I do if that was my case? And then look at what the actual vet does, and then the vet on the case does, and then you can kind of learn from there. If you go straight into practice, it's very easy to just get sent off doing everything and not having a lot of support. So it's just, yeah, I feel like no matter what job you end up doing, as long as there's good support system and some good experienced vets that are willing to teach you, then you should be fine. This is a funny question, because the question is, did you manage to keep up a good social life while at uni? And all I'll say is that vet students are notorious for being big partiers. So yes, yes, and yes. And yeah. Vet school is so much fun. I think it's the same definitely in the UK anyway, but in Ireland, in Dublin, it's just such a community. There's events all the time. It's like all very vet. It's like a little vet family. Can be a bit, maybe we should probably go outside the bubble slightly sometimes, but yeah, it's so much fun. There's also this thing called AVS, which is where all the vet schools in Ireland and the UK meet up for a sports weekend, where not a lot of sports is done and just a lot of drinking. Yeah, it's great. You dress up in costumes, it's messy, it's great fun. Vet school was excellent social life, I have to say, so I really wouldn't worry about that. That is not going to be a problem. Which brings me on to the next question, which is, what advice do I have for students that are in vet school right now? And this person said that I was the person that got them to apply for veterinary, and now they're in veterinary and in UCD, and I cannot believe that. That makes me so happy. But anyway, congratulations. I'm very impressed that you're doing veterinary. It's great. So my top tips, I suppose, well, I kind of already covered them, but the first one is the note-taking one. Have it all on a computer, easily accessible, easily searchable, laid out quite clearly, maybe laid out into different species and then different like body systems or something like that, like respiratory, GI, repro, etc. And my second one would be to enjoy it, please. Oh, I look back on uni and just have the best memories. You make friends for life. It's so much fun, and you have to remember, like, these are your future colleagues that you're, partying with, and they're your future support system. Like, you will probably end up working with people that you went to uni with at some point, and it's so nice to have them there, and you know them, and they're in there with you when you're on call and you've been working for 24 hours straight. I'm just kidding, that's not legal. And yeah, they're there and they're supporting you and they're helping you out, and it's a team. And yeah, I feel like you make some pretty amazing friends and some pretty good memories, and to really enjoy it, and don't get too bogged down. Obviously do some study, but don't get too bogged down. You'll get through it, it'll be alright. Another question is, what is the best and worst part of being a vet? So I would say the worst part, it's kind of hard. Like, I really do like my job, I will say, and I really like being a vet. Probably one of the hardest bits is just the fatigue. You know, like sometimes you could be on call a weekend and you're just up all night and working all day, and it's so busy and you're being pulled a million different ways and you're trying to juggle everything, and you know, like everyone that calls with an emergency, like that emergency is their whole world. Like their horse is their whole world, but you have one an hour. You know, for me, I'm seeing one of those every few hours, and it can be a lot, and I really do sympathize as well, because I feel like, because I own horses, and I really feel for people when, you know, things aren't going their way, they're stressed, they're not sure if they can afford the surgery the horse needs, and yeah, it can be really tough and really emotional, and I really feel for people. It's quite difficult, and I don't know, you just want to do everything you can for them, and sometimes you can do absolutely everything and it's still not enough, and that is definitely a hard part of the job. But then I suppose you have those lows, but then you have like the super highs as well, and that's probably the best part of veterinary, is when, you know, you have a case or a sick horse or a sick foal. That's probably the highlight, when you have a really sick foal and you're, you know, giving it supportive care constantly, you're in there all the time, you're trying to help them stand, you're trying to get them strong, you're trying to get them, you know, back in with the mare, nursing on the mare, and that moment when they finally stand and they finally drink off the mare is just like the best feeling ever. I love the foals so much. And followed very closely in second place is when you have a mare that, you know, might be quite a lot of sentimental value to the owner. They might just have one mare and they've been trying to get this mare in foal, and you know, when you finally have that preg scan and there's a little embryo there, that makes my day. I love it so much, and that's probably why I really do love the reproduction work. It just means so much to me. I feel like I really think about when we were trying to get our mares in foal back like a few years ago, like when we were trying to breed Cal and Dali that we have now, and I remember, oh god, I remember going and getting the vet and waiting for him to come out, and he was there to do the preg scan, and you were so excited, and then there'd be no foal and you'd be gutted, and then you'd have to go again and again, and then when you finally get that pregnancy, is just the best feeling in the world. And yeah, those are the highs that I chase, and that is what it makes it, and that's what makes it so worthwhile, for me anyway. It's great. And other benefits of being a vet is just the ability to travel, like to have this job here in Australia, and it's so easy to find jobs, and yeah, and you just meet like loads of really nice people, loads of very like-minded people. It's really good. It's a great community. I'm just so happy I'm a vet sometimes. Someone actually just asked on the Q&A box on my Instagram, which if you don't follow my Instagram, you really should. You're too late for this Q&A, but you won't be too late for the next one. But they just asked what is going on in the picture. So I posted a picture of one of the foals that we had in a while back as the background of the Q&A box. And I thought I would just show you it. There's no identifying features in this photo of this foal, so it's an anonymous foal, we'll say. So I just thought I'd talk through what is going on in this photo, because this foal is now up and healthy and flying, so it's such a nice photo to look back on when he was a little bit more unwell. So this foal came in as a dummy foal. So sometimes when the foals have lack of oxygen during delivery, they don't get up normally, they don't nurse, they basically just lie there floppy like a dummy, hence the name. And it was also very hypothermic, so his temperature was really low, and he was cold, and yeah, almost like unconscious when it came in. So This foal has in one nose it has a nasogastric feeding tube, so because it's not able to nurse, we top him up with milk every 2 hours to make sure he has enough nutrition and to feed him and keep his guts healthy. In the other nostril he has an oxygen tube, so this tube doesn't go in very far, but it's connected to an oxygen tank, so it has constant supply of oxygen, because as I said, dummy foals is very much related to hypoxia, which is low oxygen, so we want to, you know, keep that up and make sure he has enough oxygen, especially when they spend a lot of time lying down. They don't ventilate very well because they're lying on one side, so it's really important that they have enough oxygen. It also has an IV catheter in, so he'll be on a constant drip of fluids with some glucose and electrolytes in them to keep him hydrated while he isn't nursing. He also has some bandages with some bubble wrap on his legs because, as I said, he was hypothermic and their extremities get very, very cold, so that's just another way to keep them warmer. He also has a heat lamp down on him, and he's in a little straw bed, so he's in a straw little box which the mare has a little window that she can look in over at him at. So that is what's going on in that photo, and yeah, so very slowly we just support them, we try and get them stronger, we try and get them standing, and he is now up and nursing well and doesn't need any support from us and flying it. So yeah, they're the ones that are so nice to to follow along and see. Okay, so the very last question is basically a question based around getting a job. They asked, do practices offer you jobs during final year, or do you have to apply, etc. So some people had jobs lined up by like the start of final year, be it maybe in a practice that they spent a lot of time doing placement at, that then offered them a job and asked them to, you know, work for them when they did graduate, things like that. So definitely you can get a job offer before you graduate, but the majority of people will apply for a job, so there's lots of websites for job offers. In Ireland there's the Veterinary Ireland Journal. They have like a jobs listing on their website and in the actual magazine. The best place I think for jobs in Australia, is definitely equine jobs anyway, is a website called Kookaburra Vets, and that is where I found my job, and there seems to be so many equine jobs listed there. I think in Ireland there definitely the year I graduated and the year after that there was like no equine jobs advertised at all. And there is equine jobs out there. I just feel like it's a lot more word of mouth. I know people that get jobs, and I know there are, you know, job vacancies in practices, but they just don't seem to advertise them. I'm not really sure why, it's just the way it is kind of. Whereas in Australia it's very much all advertised and there just seems to be lots and lots of jobs going. But there definitely will always be jobs that are kind of word of mouth, and that's why it is important to get out there and do your placement in clinics that you are actually interested in working for maybe in the future, or even just getting those contacts. It's really, really important. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got a bit of an insight into veterinary and the road to getting there, and yeah, found it interesting / educational maybe. And yeah, if you have any more questions you can leave them in the comments. If there's a lot, I can do a part 2, but I really feel like I've answered quite a lot of questions today and this video seems to be very long, so I will try and edit it down, but it still may be quite long, so maybe another video if you need, but if not, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next Vlogmas, which will be, shall I give you a spoiler? I think I'll give you a little spoiler. Oh, okay. This one will be fun. I haven't filmed the next video yet because I'm filming this very far in advance, but it's going to be a high jump, which could be very, very fun or end very quickly because we can't jump that high. We'll see, and I might also try and rope my friend into it because her horse will surely jump a good bit higher than Rocky, so quite fun. Anyway, I will just wait and see what happens. But yeah, I will see you in that video. Fingers crossed it goes well. Bye guys!